So again, my name is Tiffany Justice. I'm the co-founder of Moms for Liberty. Tina Deskovich is here with me. We are united parents across the country fighting to reclaim public education, fighting to reclaim our parental rights and to defend them at all levels of government. And so James gave us an inside look into some of the things that are happening in this country and maybe some of the roots of where it started. And today we are joined by some amazing fighters, people that have worked within the public education system in many different ways, and private education system, and teachers and school board members and advocates. So I'd like to introduce our panel today. And if you look at your program, we've had a kind of a change in who's on our schedule. So I'm going to introduce everyone. We'll start at the end with Erika Donalds. Erika is the founder of Optima Foundation, which is helping to provide high-quality educational choices for children in this country. But before that, Erika's first a mom of 3 boys, and she also served as a school board member in Florida. Much like Tina and I, Erika saw behind the education curtain, and what she saw wasn't pretty. And so she decided, rather than kind of walking away and deciding, as most people could, to not do anything else, she decided that she was going to create better options for children in this country, and that's really what the American dream is about. So thank you, Erika, for joining us today. Next is Mr. Paul Rossi. Paul is a teacher at the Grace School in New York City. Oftentimes we're told, find another option for your children if you don't like public school. Send them to private school. Paul's going to tell us a little bit about what's happening in independent schools across this country, what you need to know about that, and perhaps as a parent, some of the steps that you can help to take to support teachers in private schools. Mr. Tony Kinnett is from Indiana. He worked in Indianapolis schools as a science administrator. He is now the founder and editor of the Chalkboard Review, or
just the co-founder and owner. I hire out the EIC position. I don't edit. No thanks.
Okay. And so Tony is helping to give a voice to teachers around this country so that they can feel supported in coming out and speaking about what's happening in the schools and helping to give them other options about how to make the change happen that they want to see. And Mr. Terris Todd, who has a very impressive title that I'm going to have to look at my paper to read. Mr. Terris Todd is with the Heritage Foundation. He is the program manager of the Civil Society of American Dialogue. Before that, he was the executive director of the White House Initiative on Education Excellence for African American Students. So welcome to our panel today. This isn't about me, this is about all of you. So I'm gonna kind of open up the discussion right away to talk about, what are some of the things that you've heard today so far that you might wanna jump and start talking about? We've had a question that's been posed today. Do we reform public education? Is it possible? What does it look like? So anyone who wants to start and jump in and start talking about what's happening in our schools?
Ladies first.
Ladies first, of course. And I think that is a big question that across the country, organizations like Moms for Liberty and just in our communities, people are asking themselves, is it reformable? Should we burn the whole thing down and start from scratch, or can there be reforms in what we right now call the public education system, or refer to as a public education system? And most of us, when we say that, we're talking about the government-run schools. And I run right now 3 charter schools, and we're opening more and more of those every year in Florida. And one time I was at a school board meeting, and this union person who's speaking against me, which happens often, said, if you could, you would make all those charter schools private schools. And I was like, yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Because ultimately, having been a school board member myself, as Tiffany mentioned, I have reservations about the monopoly reforming itself. And that doesn't mean I don't very much support all of the people who are running for school board, who are hoping to get that majority to make a huge difference in that arena. But ultimately, I believe in the free market. And I think I trust the free market more than I trust any one of these candidates to get up there and do the bold, huge things that have to be done in order for the system to truly be reformed. And what the free market does in giving people the ability to make decisions that benefit themselves and their children is it puts the pressure on everyone to bring value to the marketplace. And what is value to us as parents? The value is that I can send my child to a school where I don't have to have a law that says that they can't teach CRT. And I don't have to have a camera in the classroom to make sure that the teacher is teaching what I want them to teach and not teaching what I don't want them to teach, because I actually get to select the people that are going to be in that classroom and select the leaders of that school who I'm going to entrust my children with day to day. And when that happens, I can select the people that I do trust. And I really feel like that's the way to make these reforms. That doesn't mean that public education goes away and there's no place for a public education system. But what it means is that that system has to compete, and that marketplace, a healthy education marketplace, is going to provide the best access and the best quality to the most people, ultimately. And so I hope that all of us, whether we're on the side of burning it down or on the side of getting in there and making the reforms, that we're all working toward that goal in some way to truly put all of the power back in the hands of the parents. And I hope that makes sense.
I'd like to pick up on that because it's really a good point about private education being a potential solution. Fortunately, coming from that world myself, I can tell you that that's not in itself a solution. Many of the religious schools, particularly the school that I came from, was hijacked, captured by woke ideology. It was a religious school, in quotes. It was an Episcopal school, had a rich history, century old, but it slightly changed to an institution that was grounded in Episcopal values. And going back to what James was saying earlier about the way that wokeness works in a viral mechanism, what I saw was that the attachment proteins are the existing religious missions. And what's happening is that that moral sense of virtue and that long tradition of morality is being hijacked on empathy. Empathy is crowding out all the other moralities which form the basis of these schools that have done wonderful work up to this point. So you have to be, particularly among the 1,600, not all of them had a religious tradition, but the 1,600 quote-unquote elite private schools that are all governed by the same association, the National Association of Independent Schools. If that is an option for you, you have to be very, very careful and ask very, very pointed questions, which they do not want you to ask, about how that mission is being implemented in the curriculum, in the special DEI programs that they are running. And I've just spent the last month and a half watching hundreds of hours of footage from a conference, which is the flagship conference of these top private schools, where I've gained a really interesting understanding of how this manifests in the classroom at the lowest grades. We're talking kindergarten through 8 and beyond. So I would just say that what you're saying I agree with about private schools. It's just that you have to be extra careful.
And I think it's within that I think that really a lot of the legislative action around the country is really boiled down to is that, of course, you can open up the market and you can put pressure on schools to perform, but I'm also paying for the public school. My money is going into those schools. So when it's state-sponsored curriculum, I don't want it to segregate my children. When it's state-sponsored shoving in certain things that have no business being in front of a child at that age, I don't want it in my schools. I'm paying for it. I'm footing the bill. So while I think that opening the market is really important, we also need to keep in mind that it's our tax dollars that are paying for these things, and therefore the state is accountable to me, the buyer, the funder, and the creditor.
And ditto to what everyone else said, for the most part. But again, I think a lot of this has to be re-engineered. Again, as a White House appointee to the Department of Ed in May of 2020, working on behalf of African-American students all over the country, the re-engineering must happen. And I agree, we have to open the market up so that way it becomes a little bit more competitive. I think that's why many of the folks that are coming into our country from all over the world, into our colleges and universities, they're competitive markets. They literally compete for those students. I know my daughters in particular were getting mail all the time, trying to send them gifts and said, hey, come here, whatever. How come the local schools, the K-12 schools, doesn't have to compete for our kids, And so I really would love to see the market be open, and that way it becomes a little bit more competitive, and then maybe we'll see the quality of the education get a little bit better or get a lot more better for the sake of our kids and the future of this country.